Dejounte Murray being traded to the Pelicans makes a ton of sense for them. He's a good-sized point guard who's a good defender, even if he's not the great defender that we thought we were going to get in his last season at San Antonio, especially when he averaged like 2 steals a game and was an all-star. He's still solid, and that's good next to CJ. He's still able to cause some turnovers, and I think part of the reason that his defense has slipped is that he was part of Atlanta, who had one of the worst defenses in the league, if not the worst, if we're being honest. Their 27th ranked defensive rating didn't make anyone look good. On a team like New Orleans, who was a top 6 defense and defensive net rating last year, while being surrounded with other legit offensive weapons, we could see him put a little bit more of his effort back into the defensive end and see glimmers or some memories of those San Antonio years. At least for some stretches. I'm not predicting all defensive teams, although he has made a second team before in his career. I just think he's going to look better in a better defense than what we've seen over the past couple of seasons in Atlanta. I'm really going out on a limb. He's also good in the clutch. He hit multiple game winners last year. I think it was 3. There was 2 back-to-back games in January on the Florida stretch against Orlando and Miami. Then he had that one in overtime against the Celtics. And that's a really good thing to bring to this Pelicans team, who were just not very good in the clutch last year. According to NBA.com, they were 24th in clutch net rating, 27th in clutch wins, 26th in offensive rating in the clutch. And last year, half of the league was below 500 in the clutch. I'm going to give you 2 guesses as to where the Pelicans fell. Although they did play the fewest clutch games, so I guess that's good. If you can't win, don't let it get down to the wire. But getting a guy that has the confidence to take and make those shots helps you, provided they're a guy that you actually want taking those shots and you're comfortable with that, which in this case, I think they will be. And he balances out the backcourt in a really good way with CJ McCollum, at least on paper. They should be really complementary to each other, with CJ being a smaller score-first guard who spent many years as the secondary playmaker next to Damian Lillard. Coming to New Orleans, the hope was that he could just slide over and play the primary lead ball handler role, which he did for a stretch. His assists per game did go up from about 4.5 to 6 when he first got into New Orleans, but last year they kind of came back down to earth, and it wasn't really a secret that the team was looking for a point guard this offseason, and they got one. Very quickly. One that's been a 20-point-per-game scorer and also has shown the ability to distribute. That final year in San Antonio, he averaged over 9 assists when he was an all-star. And he's bigger than CJ, so they can split up defensive assignments well, and unlike the failed experiment in Atlanta, this is actually sliding both of them more into their natural positions, which was definitely not going to be the case with Trae Young, who has to dictate everything. In a vacuum, it's a really good trade for New Orleans, who likely aren't done. They still need to figure out what they're going to do down low. The expectation is that Valanciunas won't be coming back. They also need to figure out what they're going to do with Brandon Ingram. He's been in about every trade rumor for every team so far this offseason. But even if they don't make any more splashy moves, this deal should make them a better basketball team, and that's what you want when you're trying to get Zion his first playoff win. Now for the Hawks, I don't know. I can't quite figure out what the goal is for the Atlanta Hawks this offseason just yet. They decided to keep the first pick, despite this draft being touted as one of the weakest ones since, I don't know, like 2013 or something, and particularly weak at the top. No offense to Zachary Rizachet, but by all accounts that I pay attention to, he was basically a mid-lottery pick in a normal draft. But not trading that pick suggests that maybe they didn't get an offer they liked, but also maybe they're pushing towards youth. And that's definitely what they prioritized in this deal for Dejounte Murray, where they got a couple of draft picks and a young guy in Dyson Daniels. I don't think Larry Nance is going to be on this roster. I think he's going to get rerouted. No matter which way they're leaning, unless they can find a way to move off of Clint Capella, which I think they've been trying to do for like 2 or 3 years and it hasn't happened. So I'm not going to sit here and say, well, Clint Capella, it'll be easy to find a trade for him, because it just doesn't seem like it. They also didn't give Saddiq Bey a qualifying offer, who is hurt, so that may be why they aren't prioritizing bringing back a 25-year-old wing, or they might just not think he's that good. That's also a possibility. But they also just dumped AJ Griffin, who's only 20. And that might not have been a basketball decision, but I don't know. We're going to see what happens with Bogey. We'll see what happens with DeAndre Hunter, because if the goal is to reshuffle the deck and rebuild again around Trae Young, who's still only 26, so it's not a bad pathway forward necessarily, they do still have a lot of work to do in that regard. And so I think that's what the next moves are going to signal. At this moment, they're kind of keeping the majority of their team intact, just not as good. And I don't think that serves anyone at this point. I think the next few weeks are going to really tell us what the goal is in Atlanta, so I'm taking a bit of a wait-and-see approach at this point. What about you? Comment below. Who do you think won this trade?